Hello, I'm Dr. Garrett Boyer. Welcome to Gospel Minded, an outreach of Benedictus Psychological Services. Interested in behavioral health with a Catholic Christian perspective? If so, check out benedictuspsych.com. Here at Gospel Minded, we spend a few moments each week talking about psychology, our emotions, behavioral health, our thoughts, attitudes, beliefs, and we reflect on how these important topics are related to the gospel reading each Sunday. I always point out this is no substitute for actually getting yourself to Mass or going to church or participating in counseling, therapy, spiritual direction if you are involved with those sort of practices. But like we know so well and like we have seen time and time again, things of our mind and our psychology so often go beautifully hand in hand with our spirituality. If this is your first time checking out Gospel Minded, welcome. If you are returning, welcome back. Either way, I hope that you will like this video and subscribe to this channel so that you never miss an episode of Gospel Minded, or any other programming that we do. So here we are, Ascension. Whether you are in a part of the country where they celebrated the Ascension this past Thursday, or whether you celebrated it today, like I have, happy Feast of the Ascension of the Lord. The Gospel reading today paints this picture of change is coming now with the Ascension having happened. I want to read it because it's a very short Gospel today, but it really does emphasize what I want to talk about. So it comes from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 24, verse 46 through 53. So this is the end of Luke's Gospel, or close to the end. This is what it says. Jesus said to his disciples, "Thus it is written that the Christ would suffer and rise from the dead, and on the third day there would be repentance for the forgiveness of sins, that it would be preached in his name to all the nations, beginning in Jerusalem. You are witnesses of these things, and behold, I am sending the promise of my Father upon you. But stay in the city until you are clothed with power from on high." Then he led them out as far as Bethany, raised his hands and blessed them. As he blessed them, he parted from them and was taken up to heaven. They did him homage and then returned to Jerusalem with great joy, and they were continually in the temple praising God. What a beautiful passage. Pretty remarkable. I mean, it doesn't talk about the emotions of the disciples there with him, but, having seen the Lord, knowing of his death, John, the disciple John, witnessed that, then saw him after he had risen from the dead. And so it's like, wow, well, what else? I mean, it doesn't talk about their emotions, but here they are now seeing the Lord ascend into heaven, being taken up. Okay, yeah, sure, why not? A dead man has risen. Why would he not ascend into heaven as well? And so they worshipped him and did him homage as off he went. I think what is key about this gospel passage, what I want to talk about today, is this idea of change and transitions. The Ascension marks an important point in the lives of the disciples and in the life of the church. Jesus, in fact, rose from the dead and then made himself manifest to the disciples many times throughout the course of the gospel. But now with the Ascension, it begins this period of transition whereby now we see the Lord no more in the way that we once had. Now we receive the Advocate, the Paraclete, and when we see the Lord now, it is in sacrament. It is in the kindness and charity of others, in that sacramental life of the church. We see the Lord in many ways, but it looks different and distinct from how the disciples saw him before and then after the resurrection. So let's talk about this idea of transitions, because I think anytime there's a change in our own lives, it comes with all kinds of perhaps challenges, and perhaps that was the case too for the disciples. Here they had been able to see Jesus after his resurrection, um, making himself present to them in this remarkable way. Things are going to look different now for the disciples, and perhaps there is a sort of sadness that comes with that. Anytime there is a transition, there can be challenges that accompany it. So look at, well, here we are now in the spring of 2025. Maybe you or a family member in recent days walked across a stage and graduated. You know, I think about my own life when I graduated from high school. What a big change that was for me, for my parents. It was a good thing. I went on, I started living life on my own. It's good. And yet there was a sadness to it, a change, because life wasn't the same way that it had been before. I think about people who move and transition residences. You know, this is a big time of year now, summer for people. I think about like the military community in the midst of PCS season where they're changing their location. A lot of moving. It's good. It's generally good to be able to move, but there can be some challenges and difficulties associated with that. Saying goodbye to old friends, old places, just the overwhelming process of packing up your stuff and moving, especially if you've got a family or young children. Um, it's good, but there are difficulties associated with it. And then think about like marriage. Uh, you know, people getting married now. Here we are getting close to summer. I've got a couple weddings in my family that I'm going to be at this summer. It's a good thing. It's supposed to happen. And yet there's a sort of sadness that life is going to look different. I think about like fathers walking their daughters down the aisle, giving their daughter away to a new man. Um, it's a beautiful thing, and it should happen. And yet there's this sort of sadness that can accompany it, and that is sort of what is being highlighted here in the gospel. It's going to change. It's going to be different. It's going to be good, but transition happens, and sometimes transitions are hard. So psychologically, what do we make of this? Yes, we know that there are difficulties associated with any kind of change and transition, and they're not always so good. So I wrote down a couple notes just as I've thought about it with my own life and with patients that I've worked with before. I think first and foremost, when you're anticipating or preparing for a change in your life, do your best to think ahead and plan out what that's going to look like. You know, if you're going to be moving, a lot of preparation and planning has to go into that. Finding a new place to live, looking at school districts, what kind of grocery stores are nearby, getting all the boxes prepared and labeled. And so, yes, with any kind of change that you've got coming up, do plan and do prepare because that's important. But be prepared to adapt and adjust. Because no matter how much we plan, we can't always be perfectly prepared for every single curveball that comes our way. And so having that flexibility to be able to, as it were, kind of roll with the punches as they come. Because we know that when we have transitions, when we make changes, there are going to be hardships. We can prepare for them, but we probably aren't going to be perfectly prepared for all of it. And so just being receptive to that reality and prepared to adapt and overcome with the challenges as they present themselves. That'll help a lot. This is an important one. I think it's useful to just acknowledge what you're feeling in the midst of a transition. You know, think about if you've ever lost a family member to death. One of the most important transitions that will happen to all of us. When we've lost somebody, it is important to acknowledge what we're feeling in that grieving process. So many transitions, you know, I talked about people moving, people who graduate. Perhaps there can be conflicting emotions, pride that you or somebody you love has graduated, sadness that life will look different. I think being able to identify and acknowledge this is what I'm feeling right now subjectively, and to be okay with your feelings, even uncomfortable emotions, sadness, grief. those emotions are part of the human experience, and you don't want to suppress them. It's okay to feel what you're feeling. Acknowledge it and own it and know that it's okay. I think that's an important piece when we talk about transitions and changes. And then in the midst of all of it, this is the last thing I'll share, uh, prioritize a little bit of self care. You think about people who are getting ready for big moves. Oh, it's a lot of work. Man, is it ever stressful and taxing to, like I say, pack up the boxes, coordinate with the movers, do all the research. And it can be very easy to feel overwhelmed in the midst of that and to kind of put your own needs aside for the purpose of getting whatever job you have in front of you right now done. But you still need to take a second, take a deep breath, maybe do some exercise, do something that you enjoy, like your hobby, whatever self care looks like for you. Don't skip it when you're in the midst of some kind of transition or change. You need to do appropriate self care. There are a ton of other things that we could talk about with this, but I think these are three important and germane points as we think about the gospel reading for today. This is good stuff. And now, in anticipation of next week, Pentecost, I hope that we can keep these things in mind as we prepare for whatever transitions you have coming up. But I hope that you found this useful, and I hope you'll join me next time as well. Until then, I'll be praying for you. I hope that you will pray for me, and I'll see you next time. I'm Dr. Garrett Boyer. This is Gospel Minded. Take care.